So you want to learn how to play Orcust, do you? Well, you come to the right place. What is up, guys? It's your boy Brennan, aka Drip from Team D.D.D, back with another video. In today's video, we are going to talk about Orcust and how to play Orcust in 2024 and how I play it. I will go over what each and individual cards in the Orcust engine do that we are currently running, and then we might, if we have time in the video, do a couple of test hands and stuff like that. But I'm going to show you the different engines that are in my deck and what they do to help us to do our Orcust combos and stuff like that. So I'm going to go through it piece by piece, each individual Orcust card, then the secondary engines, the extra deck cards, etc., break it down in different parts, and then we will, if we have time, the video is not too long, we will have a couple of test hands, so you will be fully prepared to play this deck or play against this deck, knowing what every card does, so to be able to set you up for success, because that's all I want to do, is set you all up for success. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. Alright, here we are with our whole entire engine panned out. Also, before we get fully into this, if you have not seen the deck profile yet, well, here's part of it. But make sure you check the description for the rest of the profile so you know how to put the deck together yourself if you decide to run the same list as me. Which, for the record, I've had a lot of success with this list. It's just not a biased opinion. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start with the main guy here. The main boy, our normal summon, our best guy. His name is Girsu the Orcust Mech Knight. Yes, he is an Orcust. Yes, he is a Mech Knight. That's usually what ties the bridge together, because if you're not running the Horus engine like I currently am, you can also run a more budget alternative, which is using the Mech Knight cards. It's just that's not as much utility in the form of being able to get the Orcust cards out of your hand like the Horus engine provides, but it is still a cheaper alternative, and it bridges the two archetypes together. But what Girsu the Orcust Mech Knight does, he is our main normal summon. What he does on summon, he can foolish a Orcust or World Legacy card, which is what another thing that ties the Mech Knights and the Orcust together from deck to graveyard. Then, if he has two or more cards in this same card's column, up and down, whether it's yours or your opponent's, then this card can be treated as a tuner. Then, his head even has a third effect. If this is the only monster that you control, you can give yourself and your opponent a World Legacy token. And you get to place the token wherever you want. That's another reason why the Mech Knight engine is very good, because you can manipulate where the token is. Like if you wanted to, you could put the token above the extra monster zone. So when you link your token off into Link Kuriboh, there's two cards in that same card's column. Then you can special summon the Mech Knights. Which is very, very nice, because I love the Mech Knight version of this deck too. It's just my personal opinion. It's not as powerful right now because it can't main deck as much non-engine, because the Mech Knight engine is bigger than the Horus engine. But this card, that's what makes this card so powerful, because it has literally 3 effects and does so much for us and helps us get our board established and get our engine rolling. Then we are on to our next girl. Well, that was a boy, but our next girl, her name is Orcust Nightmare. What she does is, when she's in the graveyard, she can banish herself for cost to send a dark machine. It doesn't even have to be an Orcust monster. It just has to be a dark machine. You could target a monster on the field, whether it's yours or your opponent's. So you banish for cost, target your opponent's monster or your monster, preferably your own, because of the secondary effects that's about to happen. Send a dark machine monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then whatever monster you targeted, it will gain attack equal to the level of the Dark Machine sent to the graveyard times 100 of its level. So if it's a level 8, then the monster will gain 800. One thing I want you to note here is the initial targeting. Once the targeting is met, the rest of it doesn't have to happen. What I mean by that is if you go and target a card and they chain like a card like an enemy controller, Econ, or something else and that monster is no longer there, the initial targeting is met, so you still get to foolish your card from deck to graveyard. Do not let anybody cheat you on that, because the initial targeting was met. It's not like Imperm or anything like that that has a back end thing that will prevent it from resolving. No. But this is another reason why back in the day we would run Gizmic Orochi, because we can get instant access to Gizmic Orochi via Orchestrated Nightmare. But it's also how we get access to the World Wand, because the rest of our Orcust engine can't get access to Wand besides her, because the Harp can only do Orcust, and well, this can send this too. But other than that, you never really want to send this off of this unless you have a full graveyard for the rest of them. But this is the main one that you're going to get access to through this. Moving on to the next one, which is typically, arguably the best one mid-game, is Orcust Symbol Skeleton. It's a level 3 Dark Machine. Banishes for cost as well. Target one Orcust monster in your graveyard except for itself, and then you can special summon it. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of the turn except Dark Machine monsters. Or dark monsters, excuse me, sorry. That's another thing that I wanted to mention. I'm sorry if I failed to mention it with the Nightmare cards. Once you banish these cards and use their initial effects, for the rest of the turn you are locked into dark monsters. You're not locked into dark machines. But when you use these, when you use their banish effects, you are locked into dark monsters. Now, the wand does not lock you into dark monsters, but the skeleton, the rest of the Orcust cards do. So I'm sorry if I failed to mention that before. Now, back to the skeleton. This one is basically your monster reborn, because you banish it and then you can reborn any of these plus your extra deck ones if they're in the graveyard, which is basically how the deck gets its interaction with its opponent when its opponent's turn, is via this card. This is another reason why we run 2 of this card, because this card is so crucial to ensure that you can resolve it and it doesn't get D.D. crowed or stuff like that. Since all these banish for cost, they can't be ghost spelled, but the targeting that you're trying to summon from the graveyard from this can be ghost spelled, so be aware of that. He's our monster reborn. And then the boy that was on the ban list for way too long because he was broken is Orcust Harporer. What he does is you can banish him from the graveyard for cost, special summon one Orcust monster from your deck except for itself. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except for dark monsters. You can only use the effect of Harporer once per turn. So, he can get you access to your main monster, your main gear suit, directly from deck just by being in the graveyard, or any of your other Orcust. Can't get access to this, but it can get access to these. But like, this is why this was banned back in the day. Ironically enough, when he got banned, he wasn't even out yet. He came out like a month and a half after the banning of this card. So this is the first time when this previous list that just passed that these two have been in tandem together, which is so freaking insane. Because now we can go +2/+3 just off of this card. Because we can go, if we have nothing else on board, we can banish this, summon this, and then send this, and then summon our tokens if this is the only card we control. And then we just have so much board presence by just having this engraved. So like that's another reason why Foolish Burial is a 1-card combo. But this is a E-Telly, basically, if you want to kind of take little book stamps to kind of help remember. This is Emergency Teleport. This is a Foolish and Attack buff. This is a Foolish, which is the main one to get going. This is the Monster Reborn. Now, the World Wand, which is not an Orcust card, but is an honorary Orcust card because he helps us keep the flow of stuff, the flow of traffic, per se, for Orcust in the way it's supposed to be. And what it does is you can banish it from the graveyard to special summon a banished Orcust monster. I can't remember if it's Orcust or a Dark Machine. You can banish this, Orcust monsters, yes. So this is the card that is really good at helping us play through D.D. Crow and Call by the Grave. For an example, at the time of recording this video, I recently just had a tournament where I had my stuff called by the grave. My opponent called by the grave this, and D.D. Crowed my Galatea. One situation, I used the Galatea to shuffle one back, so it was just free because I already had one in Banish Pile, and then I used this to summon this and became a starter. So this being able to keep the flow of traffic is super important for us. Now, so basically this is Reborn from Banish Pile, Reborn from Graveyard, Emergency Teleport, and a Foolish, but the best Foolish. Plus given tokens and can be a tuner. Now the one that most people do not run is the Brass Bombard when it comes to the names. But the reason why we run it is because in the format that I'm currently recording this video, Imperm and Valor, aka targeting negation, is very, very prevalent and is everywhere. So the importance of this card is very high right now, because what we can do, if you don't run like a 1-for-1 or something like that, which currently I am not because I just don't like it and I don't have room for it, but if you just want to normal summon this card, you can link it off into Link Karibo. And then if you have in tangent with this, you could banish this to summon this, or you can banish this and summon this. But let's just say we're summoning this right now to protect ourselves from an imperm. So if we were to normal summon this, and this were to get impermed, and we don't have no other plays, then we're sitting ducks in the water. As where if we normal this, our brass, to link into Link Karibo, and then banish this to summon this, even if this gets impermed, we still can make our link to Galatea, and this is already in the Banish Pile to be able to shuffle back to proc our Galatea's effect. That's the reason why this card is so important. And in the current build I have 5 normal summons. This one, these 3, and an Armageddon Knight. Which most decks, if you don't already know, if you're new to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or you don't pay that much attention, most consistent decks have 5 to 6 normal summons or 5 ways to a normal summon, or etc., etc. Most decks, moral of the story, have 5 to 6 normal summons. So this is helping us get an additional normal summon while filling out, being able to get these out of hands. Because a lot of people who will try to say these are bricks, which in some ways they are bricks, but if you have this in rotation plus the horse cards, they're not as much bricky as a lot of the other cards can be. But to recap what we do here, this is a Foolish, 2 cards in the same column, whether it's yours or your opponent's, becomes a tuner because of that. Then if he is the only monster you control, you can give yourself and your opponent a token, which is very good at beating Kashtira, playing around evenly matched if you put your stuff in defense position, and can manipulate columns because you get to place the token. Whether you're playing the Mech Knight version or you are trying to protect your Galatea from being destroyed by battle, you can put their token up above where the Galatea points to, which we'll get more to that when we get to the extra deck. Then moving on, we have a Foolish and attack manipulation by whatever you target, because it has to target. It targets and banishes for cost. And then it can gain the attack equal to the level times 100 or whatever monster Dark Machine you sent. And remember, again, whatever you target, as long as the initial target was met, even if the card is not there on the resolution of this card, you can still Foolish. Do not let no one cheat you. Then this is a monster Reborn. This is Emergency Teleport. Basically, can special summon any of our Orcust monsters. This can special summon from Banish Pile by banishing. This can special summon an Orcust monster from hand. So, and remember, these will lock you into dark monsters for the remaining of the turn after banishing. And these all banish for cost. Remember that. Now, let's go ahead and get into the extra deck. All right, here we are with the extra deck. This is the standard lineup that you would see in an Orcust extra deck. Some people play 3 Galatea, but in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2024, the time of recording this video, 3 is not needed. Now, what these are is, this is a Link 2, Link 3, and an XZ. What Galatea does, Orchestra Galatea, she requires 2 effect monsters, including an Orcust monster. So you can't use the World Legacy token that Girsu provides us. So that's another reason why we have to play the Link Karibo. So what she does is, when she is linked, remind you, linked does not mean 2 arrows pointing to each other. That just means that her arrow is pointing to another. When two arrows are pointing to one another, that means co-linked. Just linked just means when she's pointing at a monster or a monster's pointing at her, basically. So, as long as she is linked, she cannot be destroyed by battle. And it's not an activated effect, so it's just lingering, basically. So, that's another reason why it's really good at being able to manipulate where you put the token. Just in case you don't have enough gas to get to one to put underneath her. But then her secondary effect is you can shuffle back a dart. You can shuffle back. Let me see. I can't even read. You can target one of your banished machine monsters. It doesn't even have to be an Orcust, and it doesn't even have to be a dark. Shuffle back one of your machine monsters, and then into the deck. And then if you want to, you don't have to. If you want to, you can set a Orcust spell or trap directly from the deck, which helps you play around things like Ash Blossom, which is very, very nice. And then moving on to Longgearsu, similar to Galatea, when he is linked, remind you again, does not mean it's two arrows pointing to one another. It's just him pointing to a monster, whether it's yours or your opponent's, or a monster's pointing to him. He cannot be destroyed by card effect. So destroyed by battle and destroyed by card effect. Okay? Now, what his secondary effect is, you can target two banished machine monsters, shuffle them back into the deck, and then if you want to, on resolution, you can send one linked monster to the graveyard. It does not have to be linked to him, but most of the time it will be. Whether you're summoning it in the extra monster zone to send their stuff away, kind of like a relinquish anima type deal, or if you're playing against another linked deck and their stuff is linked to each other. So again, it doesn't even have to be pointing to him. If they have a monster that's pointing to a problematic monster, it non-target sends. So like, let's say for an example, you're playing against Dragon Link, and they have Romulus up in there, which Romulus has two arrows pointing downwards, like bottom corners. And they have a monster on the bottom corner. You could just shuffle two back and then send a monster that was in the bottom corner away if you want to. It doesn't have to be pointed to him. It just has to be linked, which is really broken. Then moving on to the XZ, Dingirsu has to have two level 8 monsters. Okay? Remind you, back to the Longgearsu requires 2+ effect monsters, including an Orcust monster. You can't use tokens for any of them. Now, back to the Dingirsu. Dingirsu requires 2 level 8 monsters. Now, what he can do is you can only special summon Dingirsu once per turn. You can also exile summon this card using an Orcust Link monster. So your two monsters here, whether they're obviously don't have levels and they're obviously not level 8s, you can shove them on top of your XZs just because they're Orcust Link monsters. Wow. Now, another thing that this card can do while it's on the board, if anything were to be destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can detach a material from Dingirsu to protect it. It does not activate, so it does not start a chain, so it can't be negated. So, moral of the story, if they didn't imperm this early on, then they can't stop. They can't prevent you. They can't prevent you, or you can't prevent your opponent who's playing Orcust from protecting because it doesn't activate. But then its on summon effect has 2 effects on summon. Its first on summon effect is it can non-target send a card your opponent controls to the graveyard. Non-target, which is crucial in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then its secondary effect, it can equip a banished Orcust monster. You can attach one banished machine monster to this card as material. It doesn't even have to be Orcust. So it's very broken with generic machine decks. So to recap, linked, cannot be destroyed by battle. You can shuffle a machine monster from the banish pile back into the deck. And then if you choose to, you can set a Orcust spell or trap directly from deck, which the spells and traps will go over shortly after this. But even if you don't have targets in the deck in the form of spells and traps, you can still shuffle your stuff back. Don't let anybody cheat you on that, or don't try to cheat somebody on that. And Longgearsu, while he's linked, whether he's pointing to a card or a card's pointing to him, cannot be destroyed by card effects. And then you can shuffle 2 machines back to non-target send a linked monster, whether it's to him or to another linked monster, to the graveyard. And then Ningirsu requires 2 level 8 monsters or any of your Orcust Link monsters to summon him. Then you can detach non-activation to protect your stuff from being destroyed by battle or card effect. All your cards, monster, spell, or traps. Then on summon, it can non-target send something, or it can attach a banished machine monster, which is really nice to help him keep the flow of things. But that is it for the Orcust extract monsters. Let's go ahead and get into those spell and trap cards that I've been mentioning all this time. All right, here we are at the standard lineup that you will see or play when you are playing or playing against a Orcust deck. Granted, a lot of people play 2 of this. The ratios typically go from 1, 2, and 3. The most standard lineup that you'll see is just 1 of, but with me in this current format that I'm currently playing, I like to run 2, but that's just me and my playstyle. Now, starting from left and working our way to the right, what the Orchestrated Return does is Orchestrated Return can send a Orcust or World Legacy monster from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard for cost, by the way, for cost. And then you can draw 2 cards. It's just a free pot of greed to get the bricks out of your hand. That's basically it, and it's a hard once per turn, which is typically the reason why a lot of people opt to only run 1 because they don't want to see it in multiples. But in a 40-card deck, if I draw both, then it's just bad luck. But at the end of the day, it still is pot of greed at the end of the day. Then moving on to the Orcust Field Spell, which is the card that made us meta back in 2019, and the card that still potentially helps to keep us relevant to this day, is named Orchestrated Babel. What it does is it makes all of your Orcust cards quick effects, basically. It says right here, it says you can activate the effects of Orcust monsters in your graveyard and or of Orcust Link monsters you control with Orcust in their original names as quick effects. During your main phase, if this card is in the graveyard, except the turn it was sent to the graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard and add this card to your hand. So on the following turn, if this card were to get like Twin Twistered, Lightning Storm, Mystical Space Typhoon, anything like that, on the following turn, you can pitch a card and add this back. It's a field spell that literally recurs itself. It's broken. And if you have an Orcust brick in hand, or an Orcust card that a lot of people like to call bricks, you could pitch that to recur this, and then you're just setting so far ahead. And then for the final card, my favorite one in personal opinion is Orcust Crescendo. Basically an Omni-Negate, it's a counter trap, so if your opponent doesn't have Red Reboot or another counter trap to stop it, which at this moment in time of recording this video, Red Reboot is banned. So if they don't have a counter trap, then you just win, because they can't interact with this. But this card reads, when a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated while you control an Orcust Link monster, negate the activation, and if you do, banish that card. Banish that card. It negates the activation, so if the card says, for an example, the card you negated says you can only activate this once per turn, if they have a second copy, they can activate it. But it's still really nice because this negates and banishes, which makes it hard for a lot of decks to get their resources back, and that card is gone forever. But the secondary effect, in my personal opinion, is where this card really shines, outside of the fact that this card is just nuts in general, in my personal opinion, because the Omni-Negate. But its secondary effect has arguably saved me a lot. Its secondary effect is you can banish this card from the graveyard, add to your hand 1 of your Dark Machine monsters that is banished or in your deck. You cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn after you activate this effect, except Dark Machine monsters. So just like how, for an example earlier, our monsters lock us into dark monsters, the banishment effect of this locks us into Dark Machine monsters. And if you were to summon something other than a Dark Machine before you activate this effect, you cannot legally activate this effect because you have already committed to summoning something other than a Dark Machine monster. Same thing before and after. So, like for an example, if you banish this, you cannot summon nothing except for Dark Machines after the resolution. So before or after the turn you are going to banish this to add from deck or banish pile, you have to be fully committed to Dark Machines because you're not going to be able to summon anything else other than that turn. So that's another thing too. When you you just need to keep in mind. You just need to keep in mind when you do that you are fully locked into Dark Machines. Now, what is the best part about that is when you banish this, if you are running out of resources, you can search this from deck to hand. This is the main one we search. So on a crackback, we will banish this from the graveyard and then search this, normal this, foolish, and get our engine completely rolling again. And that's the best part about it. Now, that's basically it for the Orcust deck and what it does in a whole with its actual engine. Now, at this current time, I am running the Horus cards. Let's go ahead and slide over to that, and I'll speed run what those do, and then we'll get a test hand or two so you guys can see everything and how the combos go. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the Horus part. See you over there. All right, here we are at the Horus part. My Horus part is 3 Inseti, 1 Happy, and 3 King Sarcophagus. There's more Horus cards that in the archetype, but I only opt to run these 2. Now, what Inseti does, which is arguably the best one, he can send a card from your hand to the graveyard, including himself. So himself plus another, which is really nice with our Orcust cards because we like to get them in the graveyard. So he sends him and another card to add a King Sarcophagus, and then on resolution, if you want, you can draw a card, which is really nasty. But then if you get into a situation where you don't want to overlay him or link him off, and you just want to leave him on the board as an interaction with your opponent, you can, because he has a very solid effect. What his interaction effect is, if any of your cards leave the field due to your opponent, you can non-target send a card they control to the graveyard, which is very, very broken, because it's basically like a Dengirsu, but in the main deck. Because it says right here, where is that? Right here. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, while this card is in your main monster, if another card or cards you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your main monster zone, except in a damage step, you can send 1 card on the field to the graveyard. So you can't do it if something's left by battle, which I probably should have mentioned. But if it's any other time, like Dark Hole, etc., whatever, you can, even though Dark Hole would wipe this. But moral of the story, if they banish something like an SP Little Knight or something like that, and this will still here, then you can non-target send a card they control to the graveyard. Now, moving on to Happy. Happy's really broken. Happy doesn't really have a discard effect. It's kind of a brick in the hand. But remind you, both of these and all the Horus monsters, as long as you control a King Sarcophagus or a card that is named King Sarcophagus, you can special summon them from the graveyard for free inherently, so they cannot be stopped because they don't start a chain. So Ghost Spell and stuff like that, Skullmeister, cannot stop them. But instead, a Happy secondary effect is if a card were to leave the field due to opponent's card effect, except during the damage step, you can add back 2 cards from your grave and or banish pile. So one from each, 2 from each, either or. So you can add back your follow-up, add back your more interruption. You can add back a starter and a hand trap. It's really, really gross what this card can do, and it forces your opponent in an awkward situation when they're trying to interact with your board. Definitely if you leave these up. Now, moving on to the best card in particular in some situations besides Inseti is King Sarcophagus. It says, this card reads, Horus monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects that do not target them. You can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard for cost. Send 1 Horus monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can only use the effect of King Sarcophagus up to 4 times per turn. So you can really thin out your Orcust hands. Once per turn, at the start of damage step, if a Horus monster battles an opponent's monster, you can send that opponent's monster to the graveyard. So, whether you are attacking them or they are attacking you, during the damage step, you can send that card to the graveyard. Remind you during the damage step, unless a card says otherwise, nothing can be activated during the damage step to negate this, even if they have an Omni Negate on board. The only things that can activate during the damage step is a card that mentions it can, or quick play spell, or traps, or anything that would manipulate attack level boosts is the only things that can activate during the damage step. So keep that in mind. So, but that is it for the Horus engine. That is it for what we like to use them for. Basically thin out our deck, because if you couldn't already tell, Orcust is a graveyard-centric deck, and it likes the cards in the graveyard. Granted, they can be banished, so we don't really care about cards like Shifter, even though Imseti cares about Shifter because he has to send to the graveyard. But it basically flows through the graveyard. And the way I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you that in this combo video here in a moment, how they kind of flow together. But without any more talking, let's go ahead and get into the combo video. All right, here we are at the combo portion of the deck. We're just going to do a random test hand, and hopefully we don't break because the cards were in order. But let's go ahead and start it off as if we're going first with no interruptions. This is what we have. Now, what I would do here, since we have no Orcust cards, I would probably use the Imseti with the return, because we have the 1-card combo here, and test for Ash. Because right now, the way our hand's sitting, we have to prioritize Orcust combo over Horus combo, basically. Because the Horus cards are not really combo, they're just basically there to help us get into our Orcust cards. So, what we'll do is you want to keep one Imseti in hand. I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, if you draw off of the Imseti and you draw an Orcust card, then this is dead. So you can think that too, but I would typically like to hold another Imseti just in case it gets Ash and you have one for the next turn. So what we'll do is we'll pitch for cost. Okay. We will add the King Sark. Draw, which we did draw an Orcust card, which is the best one. Now, what we can do is we can activate the King Sarcophagus. And then we'll pitch the other Imseti. Since we already have access to the Horus engine, we don't need to worry about it. This is where we would go and send the Happy. Okay? Happy's in graveyard now. Now, what we can do is Inherent Summon. Typically, you want to summon the Imseti first over the Happy if you only have one Imseti in grave, because you want to play around Bestials, because when you control a monster, Bestials become alive as quick effects, and then if you don't have nothing else in graveyard, then you're fine from it. But just something to play around. Because with this combo, I want to show you how to play around as much as you can. Now, you don't want to overlay yet, because you want to wait and see what happens with hand traps. So this is where you normal summon. Then if this gets negated, this is where you'll take these two and make Zombie Vampire to potentially mill into an engine if we didn't have Foolish Burial, etc., etc. But we're pretending our opponent just did not open any hand traps, and we have a field day. So now we'll go get the 1-card combo. Before you banish and get locked into dark monsters, remember that. This is where you want to overlay. And when you overlay and do anything in monsters that's going to stay in the main monster zone, you want to keep in mind where your zones are going to be for your link monsters, like so you can protect your Galatea and Longirsu, like I mentioned before. So I'm going to put him here in case I don't have enough gas to get to the IP route. So we overlay before we locked into darks to make the Photon Lord for a monster negate, because he's a light, and if we're locked into darks, then we obviously can't summon him. Now, what we can do is banish the Harp to summon the Nightmare, because Nightmare is the next one that helps us go +1. But with this hand, it looks like we're going to have enough gas to get to the IP route, so we can summon our Galatea up here. So now what we can do is link these two off and not throw our cards into Galatea. Now, what we can do is banish the Galatea, targeting any of our monsters. So we're going to target this to foolish and a monster. So here we are going to foolish a simple skeleton. Simple skeleton has a level 3. So now Photon Lord will gain 300 attack until the end of the turn. Now, what we can do is banish to summon the Girsu. Now, what we can do is Galatea effect, target the Nightmare, send back to set a Orcust spell or trap. We are going to go the route of more interaction with Babel sets, and then we can activate said Babel. Now, because we're not going to burn the Foolish, even though we could. It was just an extender at that point. We're going to hold it for follow-up from next turn. Now, what we can do is, since we control an Orcust Link monster, we are allowed to generically summon our Dingirsu. Since our opponent doesn't control anything problematic, we're not going to send nothing, we're going to attach. And what we're going to attach is, let me scoot the thing up a little bit, is our skeleton to himself. Because now all of our stuff is quick effects, which means we're going to summon this on our opponent's turn to non-target send something for free. Now we're going to take him and link them into an Alpi Masquerena. Now, in our graveyard, we are pretty full. You have a couple of different options here. You can hold the Foolish for a follow-up, or you can send an Orchestrated Nightmare in case to play around Crow. If they Crow this, then you can send your other copy of Skeleton just so you still have interaction. That's another reason why 2 Skeleton is so important. And you can send the Nightmare will be able to protect the Masquerena if they try to attack over it with something that's not barely bigger than her by trying to bait her out and stuff like that, which is probably the better route. So we'll go Foolish Burial, and then we will send the Nightmare to play around D.D. Crow and potentially protecting her from being destroyed by battle if they try to bait her out early with a monster that's on a couple of 100 attack points higher. And remind you, Nightmare is a quick effect. Nightmare is a monster that is an effect that can manipulate attack, which can be done during the damage step where nothing can be activated, so they can't ash it or anything like that. So let's say since she has 800 attack, if they're trying to attack over it with a monster that's 900 attack, during the damage step, quick effect, banish, target, Foolish second skeleton, and then she'll gain 300 attack. Their monster will die, take damage, and then your skeleton is live again to summon back anything on your opponent's turn. It's pretty nifty how that can happen. So that's another thing to keep in mind too. Remind you, Nibiru is not a bad card to have right now, because if there's any deck that doesn't care about activating Nibiru after having a full board, it will be us. Because we gain resources through the graveyard because we have so much follow-up with this and our Horus cards, plus our Orcust cards in graveyard via Nightmare and Skeleton. So we don't care if, worst case scenario, they play through all of our negates, our sins, and our interruptions by making SP Little Knight or Long Girsu a negate and a send, that we have to nib them as an emergency card. And then we can just remake everything. So it doesn't really matter in that regard. But other than that, that is basically Orcust. And I hope you have learned something from this video and you have basically learned how to play the deck or how to combat the deck or what the deck is basically does in modern times of 2024, the time of recording this video. Excuse me. But other than that, guys, this is it for the introduction to Orcust if you're new to it. Again, I really hope you learned something, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe if you aren't already. Bell notifications so you never miss an upload, and check the description for all the ways supporting me like Patreon, Discord, affiliate link for TCG, and everything else down there as well. I love you all so much for it. It's your boy Brendan, aka Drip from Team D.D.D, signing out till next time. Peace. Good dueling, my guys.